The ink on the notary stamp was still drying when my daughter called to say she loved me. That was 8 months before I found out she had forged my name on a home equity loan for $83,000. I keep the copy of that document in a manila folder now, second drawer of my filing cabinet, right behind my will. Some days I forget it's there. Other days I take it out and just look at my signature, the one I never wrote, and I try to remember who I was before I knew my own child was capable of something like that. My name is Virginia. I'm 64 years old. I taught 3rd grade for 27 years in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. I have a pension, a paid-off house, 2 cats named Biscuit and Earl, and 1 daughter. Her name is Tamara. She's 38. She has her father's eyes and my stubbornness, and for most of her life those 2 things served her well. Her husband's name is Craig. I'll get to Craig. When my husband passed, that was 9 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 4 months from diagnosis to gone. Tamara was the one who moved back home for a while. She slept in her old room. She made me soup. I didn't eat. She sat with me through the nights when I couldn't breathe right from the grief. I don't want you to think I'm telling a story where she was always the villain. She wasn't. For a long time, she was my person. Craig came 2 years later. She met him at a work conference in Phoenix. He sold commercial real estate and had the kind of confidence that fills a room before a person does. The first time I met him, he hugged me like we were already family and called me Mom within 40 minutes. I remember thinking that was fast. I remember thinking a lot of things I didn't say out loud. They got married in the fall. Nice ceremony, outdoor venue, string lights, and apple cider. I paid for a good portion of it, not because they asked, because I wanted to. Tamara was happy. That mattered to me more than the money. The first year was fine. The second year, Craig's real estate deals started falling through. The market shifted, he said. Timing, he said. He had 3 big commissions that just needed another few months to close. Tamara took a second job waitressing on weekends. I started bringing groceries when I came to visit without being asked. By year 3, they were behind on their mortgage. Tamara called me on a Tuesday evening. She was calm, almost too calm, the way she gets when she's already decided something and just needs me to agree. She said they were 2 payments behind. She said the bank had sent a warning letter. She said Craig had a deal closing in 60 days, just 60 days. And if they could get through this patch, they'd be fine. I transferred $8,000 the next morning. I didn't ask Craig to call me. I didn't ask for paperwork. I just helped, because she's my daughter and that's what you do. 60 days came and went. The deal fell through. Craig had another one lined up. Just 90 more days. I want to tell you that I saw what was happening clearly. I want to say I recognize the pattern. But the truth is, when it's your child, when it's someone you watched learn to walk, someone you stayed up with through every fever and nightmare, you find reasons to believe them even when the evidence is stacking up in the other direction. Over the next 18 months, I gave them money 6 times. The total was just under $40,000. I kept a record in a spiral notebook I bought at the dollar store, not because I planned to ask for it back, just because I needed to feel like there was some order to it, some sense that I was choosing to do this rather than being slowly emptied out. Then came my 64th birthday. Tamara threw me a small dinner at their house, just the 3 of us plus my neighbor Diane, who has been my friend since 1987. Craig grilled chicken. Tamara made my mother's potato salad recipe, the one with the celery seed. Diane brought a lemon cake. It was a lovely evening. Craig was charming and attentive and poured wine and laughed at all the right moments. He gave a toast. He said I was the most generous woman he'd ever known. He said their family wouldn't have survived the last 2 years without me. He looked me in the eye when he said it. I went home that night feeling warm and full and grateful. 3 weeks later, I got a letter from a financial institution I'd never heard of. The return address was in Delaware. The letter was addressed to me. It referenced a home equity line of credit in my name, secured against my house, opened 14 months prior. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs stopped working right. The amount was $83,000. The account was current, meaning payments had been made. Meaning someone had been making payments on a loan I didn't know I had. which meant someone had access to the money and was slowly drawing it down. The available balance remaining was $11,000. $72,000 had already been spent. I called the number on the letter. A customer service representative confirmed the account details, confirmed my address, my date of birth, my social security number, confirmed the signature on the notarized application. I said, I did not open this account. There was a pause. She said she would need to transfer me to the fraud department. I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time after I hung up. Biscuit came and pushed his head into my hand. I didn't move. I kept thinking about Tamara's face at that birthday dinner, how she'd hugged me at the door when I left, how she'd said, I love you, Mom, I really love you. And I had believed her completely. I called my bank next. My own home bank, the one I've used for 30 years. I asked them to run a check on any accounts or liens attached to my home address or social security number. The woman I spoke with was kind. She was quiet for a long time while she looked. Then she said, Ms. Menace, Virginia, I'm going to recommend you come in and speak with our branch manager in person. I knew then that there was more. I drove to the bank the next morning. I sat across from a man named Richard, the branch manager, 20 years younger than me, clearly uncomfortable, and he showed me the paperwork. The home equity line had been opened through a notary in a suburb on the east side of Columbus. The application had my information on it, filled out in neat block letters. The signature line held something that looked like mine if you weren't looking closely. If you'd only ever seen my signature twice or 3 times in your life, you might not catch it, but I taught myself to sign my name a particular way after I got married. The loop on the G in my last name, I'd always made it go clockwise. The signature on that application went the other way. I took a photograph of it with my phone. I didn't say anything to anyone. I drove home, made coffee I didn't drink, and sat at my kitchen table with the spiral notebook in front of me. $40,000 I had given willingly. $83,000 taken without my knowledge. $123,000, plus 9 years of groceries and birthday money and the wedding I paid for and the time I hired Craig, a business attorney, when he was being sued by a former client. I thought about calling Tamara right then. I thought about it for 3 hours. I picked up my phone 4 times, put it back down. I called my own attorney instead, a woman named Barbara who'd done my estate planning after my husband died. I told her everything. She was very still on the other end of the line. When I finished, she said, Virginia, this is fraud. This is a serious crime. Do you understand that? I said yes. She said, do you want me to contact them, or do you want to do this yourself? I said I needed a week. Barbara said, okay, but don't confront them alone, and don't tell them what you know yet. I said okay, and then I didn't follow her advice because Tamara called me that same evening. It was a Wednesday. Around 7:30, she called to tell me Craig had a new opportunity, a commercial development project, investors already lined up, and they just needed a small bridge loan to cover closing costs. $30,000. Just $30,000, and they'd pay back everything, all of it, with the commission. I don't know what I expected to feel in that moment. I think I expected to feel rage. Instead, I felt something colder than that, something very quiet and very clear. I said, Tamara, I need you to come over. Tomorrow, come alone. She paused. Is everything okay? I said, please just come. She arrived the next afternoon at 2 o'clock. She was dressed nicely. She always dressed nicely when she wanted something, and she brought a candle from the fancy soap store at the mall. She kissed my cheek. She smelled like the perfume I gave her for Christmas. I had the manila folder on the kitchen table. She sat down. She looked at the folder. She didn't reach for it. I said, I got a letter from a bank in Delaware. She went very still. I opened the folder and slid the document across the table toward her. I watched her face. She didn't look at it. She was looking at me. I said, I need you to tell me what this is. What happened next is something I've replayed many times. Tamara did not cry. She did not try to explain. She sat back in her chair and crossed her arms and said, I was going to pay it back. That was the first thing she said. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I don't know what you're talking about. Just, I was going to pay it back. I said, when? She said Craig had a deal. I said I'd heard that before. She said this one was different. I said they were all different. She said I didn't understand how hard things had been, how much pressure they were under, how she'd done the only thing she could think of when the bank denied their loan application. I said, "You forged my signature." She said I used your information to help our family. I didn't think of it as. I said, "You forged my signature on a federal lending document. That is a felony." The word landed. I watched it land. She uncrossed her arms. For just a moment, something broke through, something younger and scared, and then Craig walked in. I hadn't heard his car. I don't know how long he'd been outside. He walked through my unlocked front door like it was his own house, which I suppose in his mind it might as well have been, and he sat down beside Tamara and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as managed. He said, "Virginia, let's talk about this like adults." I said, "Sit down and be quiet. This is between me and my daughter." He said, "With all due respect, this affects our family." I said, "It affects my house, my name, my credit, my retirement. Your name is not on any of this." He said some things after that. About how the market had been unfair to them. About how I had more than enough. About how family helps family and I was acting like a stranger. He said the word ungrateful at some point, which I found remarkable given the circumstances. Tamara watched him talk. She did not stop him. I picked up the folder. I stood up. I said, "I want you both to leave my house." Craig said they weren't leaving until we worked this out like reasonable people. I went to my kitchen counter, picked up my phone, and said, "You have 30 seconds to stand up and walk out that door, or I am calling the police right now." Tamara looked at Craig. Something passed between them. They left. I locked the door. Then I sat on the floor again because that seemed to be where my body needed to be. Biscuit and Earl both came this time. I held Earl against my chest until my breathing slowed. I called Barbara that night. She said, "I'm filing the fraud report tomorrow. I'm also sending a cease and desist to both of them, and I'm putting a freeze on all your accounts and a lien alert on your property." I said, "She's my daughter." Barbara said very gently, "I know." The next week was quiet. No calls from Tamara. No calls from Craig. I half expected Craig to show up at my door with another version of managed calm, but he didn't. I went to my bank and met with the fraud investigator. I filed a report with the local police department. The detective assigned to my case was a woman about Tamara's age. No nonsense, thorough. She took my spiral notebook. She took the birthday dinner as context, she said. She told me not to reach out to Tamara or Craig, and this time I followed the advice. 12 days after Tamara walked out of my kitchen, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 2 minutes and 40 seconds long. I know because I've listened to it more times than I'd like to admit. She said she was sorry, the first time she'd said those words. She said Craig had convinced her it was a loan, not theft, that they'd pay it back with interest, that she'd told herself it was almost the same as asking. She said she knew that wasn't true. She said she was scared. She said she didn't want to lose me. She didn't mention Craig's name again after that sentence. Not once. I did not call her back. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The notary who had processed the application was contacted first. She identified Tamara from a photograph. She said a woman matching Tamara's description had come in with a completed application and photo identification. Mine, either a copy or the original, she wasn't certain. She had notarized the signature without witnessing me sign it in person, which was itself a violation. She cooperated fully. Craig's financial records were subpoenaed as part of the fraud investigation. The money had gone directly into a joint account belonging to Craig and Tamara, and from there, the majority had been transferred to a private investment account in Craig's name alone. Tamara had not had access to that account. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Tamara had committed a federal crime against her own mother, and most of the money had been moved somewhere she couldn't reach. When Barbara called me with that information, I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, "She still signed the papers." Barbara said, "Yes, she did." The case was prosecuted. Both Tamara and Craig were charged. Craig was charged with conspiracy to commit bank fraud and money laundering. Tamara was charged with bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The trial lasted 4 days. I testified on day 2. I sat in that witness chair and I looked at my daughter across the courtroom. She was wearing a gray blazer and her hair was pulled back the way she used to wear it for school picture day. Craig sat beside her at the defense table. He did not look at me once. The prosecutor asked me to walk through the timeline. I did. She asked me if I had authorized the loan. I said no. She asked if I had signed the application. I said no. She asked me to describe the signature I saw in the document and explain how it differed from my own. I explained the loop on the G. Tamara looked at me when I said that. Just for a second. I held her gaze. I didn't look away. Craig was found guilty on both counts. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution of $83,000. Tamara was found guilty on all 3 counts. She was sentenced to 3 years with all but 14 months suspended. She served 14 months and was released on supervised probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution jointly with Craig. I have received $11,200 in restitution so far. The house is still mine. I had the locks changed the week after they left my kitchen. The accounts are all in my name with new passwords and new security questions. Barbara helped me update my estate documents. My neighbor Diane still brings lemon cake on my birthday. My cats are both fine. Earl has a bad hip, but he manages. I don't know how to end a story like this cleanly. People want the part where I say I've made peace with it, or the part where I say I'll never forgive her. The truth is neither of those things is fully true yet. I think about the night she moved back home when her father died. How she slept in her old room and made soup. How I could hear her moving around in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, and I found her standing at the sink and she just turned around and said, "I don't know how to do this, Mom. I don't know how to be here without him." And I held her the same way I'd held her when she was small. I think about that, and I think about the signature that went the wrong way around. I am not the same woman I was before I opened that letter. I think about her sometimes. The woman who transferred $8,000 without paperwork because love felt like enough reason. I feel tender toward her. I feel a little sorry for her. I don't think I can afford to be her again. What I will tell you is this. I know now what I am willing to carry and what I am not. I know now that generosity without boundaries is not virtue. It is an open door, and not everyone who walks through it means you well. I know that the people who love you do not ask you to disappear quietly inside their needs. I'm 64 years old. I have a paid-off house and a filing cabinet and a pension and 2 cats. I have enough, and I know now what enough means. If you are watching this and you recognize something in what I've described, if there's a Craig in your life or a version of this story playing out quietly in your own home, please don't wait until you're sitting on your kitchen floor. You deserve to know the truth about your own name. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this ended. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. At the kitchen table, the way you do when you're 64 and you finally have enough stillness to look back clearly. The truth is, nothing that happened came out of nowhere. I can trace every step. I gave money without paperwork because I wanted to believe that love made contracts unnecessary. I stayed quiet about the discomfort I felt around Craig because I didn't want to be the difficult mother-in-law. I transferred funds 6 times without a single conversation about repayment because asking felt like distrust, and distrust felt like a failure of motherhood. Each one of those choices, made with what I thought was generosity, opened a door a little wider, and eventually, someone walked all the way through. That's not self-blame. I want to be clear about that. What Tamara and Craig did was wrong. Legally, morally, completely. They made their own choices, and they answered for them. But I've had to be honest with myself about the part where I kept the door open long past the point when my own instincts were telling me something was off. I felt it. I just talked myself out of it every time, because the alternative, believing my daughter was capable of this, was too painful to sit with. Wisdom, I've come to think, is not about knowing more facts. It's about being willing to see what's actually in front of you, even when what's in front of you breaks your heart. Tamara knew the loop on my G. She had seen me sign things her whole life, and still, she made that signature go the wrong way around. Wisdom would have been me recognizing, months earlier, that someone who takes without asking once will take without asking again. Not because people are irredeemable, but because patterns are real, and I was choosing not to read them. The resilience part came after the folder on the kitchen table, after the courtroom, after the $11,000 in restitution that will probably never become 83. I had to decide who I was going to be on the other side of this. Not bitter. Bitterness is just grief that never found anywhere to go. Not naive either, something in between. Somebody who could still trust Diane and her lemon cake. Somebody who could still feel the warmth of Earl against her chest at 2 a.m. without it being shadowed by everything that happened. That's the work, I think. Not getting over it, just not letting it become the whole story of who you are. I don't know what Tamara is now. I don't know who she'll be when her probation ends. I hope she looks clearly at what Craig moved into that private account she couldn't touch, and I hope she asks herself some hard questions about what she chose and why. Not for my sake, for hers, because the most dangerous thing in that whole story wasn't what she did to me, it was how she explained it to herself. What I know is this: my name is mine, my house is mine, my credit, my accounts, my signature with the clockwise loop, mine. And from now on, I am the only one who signs for anything in my life. That feels like enough to build on.